Boker Tov, Bruchim Habayim. We are continuing on our Smicha program, going through Hilchot Shabbat, and we're starting the very exciting Siman, Shin Chaf Aleph. Shin Chaf Aleph is an array of topics that we're going to cover, very practical applications of things that happen on daily basis in a Jewish kitchen. And we started with Sif Bet because Sif Aleph again speaks about a totally different subject of Muktzeh, which we're not going to be discussing. So we start from Sif Bet. Hopefully we'll cover until Sif Vav, which all of those 5 Sifim speak about the same subject of pickling, salting, and using brine in different products that the person on a daily basis uses. Can you make salt water? Imagine if the first night of Pesach falls on Shabbat. Can you make salt water? For those who do salt water, right? The minhag by us has been red wine vinegar for dipping the karpas in, not salt water, to represent the blood of Yosef, karpas, ketonet pasim. A lot to be said about that. But if you're doing salt water, can you make salt water on it's a good siman. Can you make salt water on? Start your day with bracha pouring down. Can you make salt water on Shabbat? Or can you salt a bunch of cucumbers together? You want to give cucumbers to your kids. You have peeled cucumbers. You want to salt them and put them there. Perhaps you can't do it, says the Shulchan Aruch, right? Surprisingly, you'll see in just a moment. Right? Then, if that's the case, how do you eat salad? Like, you have this Persian salads. The Israelis stole the name, right? And you want to make it and salt it on Shabbat. It would seem, based on the Shulchan Aruch, there should be asur to do that, right? So, what can you and what can't you salt on Shabbat, or just making brine and salt water would be the question we're going to deal with. So just a little preface. The Gemara discusses this in Masechet Shabbat and Daf Kufchet Amud Aleph. The Mishnah starts in the Gemara going through a Machloket Amoraim and followed with a Braita that explains this, which becomes really the core structure of our Sifim over here in our Siman. Now, before anything, I want to read to you a language from the Alter Rebbe of Shulchan Aruch Harav in Orach Chaim Siman Shin Chaf Aleph Sif Bet, and I read and translate. He writes, "Ha-me'abed et ha'or hu me'avot melachot." When you process the skin of an animal, that's one of the avot melachot, right? Because they needed for or tachash on top of the Mishkan. There were 3 layers of cover. The top one was from skin of a special miraculous animal called tachash. We don't have it running around in LA Zoo or anywhere else. It was a colorful, beautiful, amazing, but they had to process the skin. You don't skin the animal and just stick it on top of the Mishkan. You have to process it. And the process involves salting dipping the skin into salt, right? So therefore, the process of me'abed, tanning, would be a isur doraita. So from that, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, we learn, but only on a derabanan, on a rabbinic level, we learn salting other stuff. Aval hamoleach basar chai. If you are salting meat, if you're salting meat on Shabbat, afilu molchan harbe k'desh yitkayem zman merube. Even if you are deep salting them because you want to make beef jerky, you want to make them stay for a long time, preserving it for a long period of time. Or if you want to be able to eat it raw on Shabbat, right? In other words, imagine Chacham Obadiah Yabi Omer actually writes, Zeman Milchama, when you want sakana, mamash sakana, you want to cook, it's mutar to even cook meat on Shabbat, or you just want to eat something and you have, like nowadays we have this concept of carpaccio, right? What is this, a French name? Right? Huh? What? So, carpaccio, right? Yeah. Lo aleinu velo alechem, right? You have this people who feel fancy eating raw, chewing on raw meat, right? It's actually supposed to be one of the delicacy, very expensive dishes. So if you want, but you can't just do that. You cut the meat, the blood comes out, you're in big trouble. So you want to salt the meat to just be able to eat it raw. That would be isur darabanan, not the oraita, but isur darabanan, right? Salting meat. Says the Shcharu Charav lefisha melach mu'il lebasar chai, because melach, salting process, is good for raw meat. We're talking about the raw meat that has now been salted for kosherizing process. Lerakechanu takeno l'chachshiro la'achira. It softens, it prepares it for being eaten, v'domeh le'ibud, and therefore the process that helps the quality of meat is very much similar to the tanning process, which higher the quality of this skin. So says that's on a drabanan level, of course, right? Of course, for preservation, deep salting will be asur. That goes without saying. And that, says the Shulchan Aruch, is even b'makom hefsed gadol. Even if you're going to lose the whole meat, it's going to go bad and rot away, and it's a lot of money, still, it's a full-fledged Isur Darabanan, you can't do it. Even if you kosherized it with salting process of the meat, says the Shulchan Aruch, you still cannot do it. All the other things also, it just drops a bomb shell. Nothing you could salt on Shabbat, in order to preserve them. So pickling on Shabbat, asur, right? Cannot start pickling process on Shabbat. That would be a full-fledged isur derabanan, right? Even if all the things that you have is vegetables and so on, they're going to all go bad if you don't pour the salt brine inside and start pickling them. Doesn't make a difference. Full-fledged Isur Darabanan can't do it. So now, the question is, this is the Oraita and Darabanan level of Isur Ma'abed and pickling. What are they? We're not necessarily doing any of these things. We're not tanning. We're not creating pickle necessarily, right? But we do salt stuff, right? You want to salt 10 eggs and give it to your kids. How do you do it? You just, peel them off, you salt all of them, and put it there for everyone to come and take, whatever it is, in the morning. Is that asur, really? Or you want to have a bunch of cucumbers and put them... How about sugar, by the way? Sugar also preserves things, right? That's why you have jam. The jams are not going to go bad. You could leave them for 10 years, it's going to be still a good jam, right? Because sugar has also preservation qualities. Is that going to be asur? What's the halacha really for it? All of these things we're going to discuss in the next 20-25 minutes, Bezrat Hashem. So, without further ado, I want to just share with you what the Gemara says, and we'll jump right into it. By the way, those new in Habura that don't have the pamphlets, this comes with actually a source sheet in English and Hebrew. And of course, the Mishnah Berurah is a baseline, so please, those who are new, see myself afterwards, and I'll prepare for you for next week with a pamphlet, Bli Neder. And the Mishnah Berurah, if you don't have it, it's recommended to buy one, to get one, and have your own Mishnah Berurah. If not, we're going to have PDF of every week's thing with Hashem available as well. We're working, by the way, on a PowerPoint projector presentation for those who want to just follow where I am, but as we move from source to source. If I just need one person to be volunteering for helping me out beforehand to set up, which is pretty simple once you have it set up. So that would be appreciated if someone wants to volunteer for that as well. But be as may, just bear with me. It will be pretty clear, hopefully, in the elements that we're going to discuss today. So there is a Mishnah in Daf Kuf Chet of Masechet Shabbat, and the Mishnah brings a machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi whether or not you could make brine, salt water on Shabbat. So Chachamim, the Tanakama, holds that you could make a little bit, not a lot, not large quantity of salt water you cannot make on Shabbat, period. But a little bit for the need of the day, you can do, no problem. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says that even making a little brine on Shabbat is asur. Fine, halakha is like Tanakama. Halakha is like Tanakama, that you could make a little bit, but you can't make large quantity of salt water on Shabbat. We'll get to definition of this in practical halakha in about 2 minutes. But then the Gemara itself brings a braita. The Gemara brings a braita that says that any amount for eating, it's mutar. That's what it means, little bit. A little bit was for the sorech of the day, whatever you want to eat that day, that's considered a little bit. And a lot means when you're pickling things. That's already considered a lot. Okay? Fine, so that's the braita. Then the Gemara brings a shita from Rabbi Yehuda bar Chaviva that making strong salt water is gonna be asur. And Abaye in the Gemara explains strong means when you have vast majority of salt and little water. Enough that the egg, the Gemara says, will float in it. Anyone has gone to Yam HaMelech? Like, not me, but if you have enough consistency of salt, things will float. Now, egg is easier to float, and Abaye quantifies this by saying 2/3 salt, 1/3 water, and that would be the Isur. The Ran explains the Gemara to mean, and that's halakha as we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch, that whenever you have 2/3 salt, it's asur to make even a little bit. That type of brine you cannot make, period, on Shabbat. What's nafkamina? Nafkamina is, Lel Pesach falls to be on Shabbat. You want to make salt water? Gesund rahit, as they say in Farsi. Yeah? You could make it, no problem. Just don't make a very, very salty one that's 2/3 salt. Make a little bit less than 2/3 salt, and you're good to go. Half and half, 50-50, you're good to go, right? Doesn't have to be that salty, because that's already considered la'achila. It's considered a little amount, and that would be mutar. There's no problem with that, right? Practical halacha. But you see how this is stemming from the Mishnah and the Gemara directly going into halacha. Fine. So strong salt water of that nature you cannot make even a little bit. Yes.
Why is making brine an issue? I thought the issue was doing something that's like similar to ibud. Making the brine is not doing anything.
Okay, so we'll get to that in just a moment, right? Well, once you said it, let's actually just get into that, because we are basically up to that anyways. So it says the Shulchan Aruch. I'm reading Siman Shin Chaf Aleph Seif Bit, and this is again straightforward from the Gemara, based on the Shmuel's explanation of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Says the Shulchan Aruch, En osin memelach harbe beyachat. You cannot make salt water on Shabbat if you're making large quantity at once. Latet letoch hakvashim, to put inside items you are trying to pickle. Mishum dedami leibud, because this looks like tanning. It looks like the process that you're making this in order to do kvisha, which is asur on Shabbat. So the salt water making process already looks like, why are you making so much salt water? You only make that much salt with a bucket of salt water? Who makes a bucket of salt water?
That's my nine.
Who makes a bucket of salt water?
Pickling.
Someone's pickling. So the making of the salt water itself is a problem. We'll get to that just in a moment. But Dafka didn't answer your question because, as you'll see, it will be machloket, Eliyahu Rabbah, Tochein Shabbat, and many of the Achronim on each one of those camps, as we'll see, what the Rishonim seem to say that the Mishnah Berurah brings as well. So, before getting into that, there are two schools of thought for why this concept is asur altogether. Rashi says it is because it looks like you are making pickling, which looks like tanning, and therefore it's asur, right? Because it is like me'abid, like tanning, the whole process of skin that we just spoke about 5 minutes ago. That's why it's asur. Rambam says no. Rambam understands the whole sugya completely differently. He says because when you pickle things, pickling, salting, the Gemara says, medicha has an element, a component of bishul. Maliach keroteach, in the language of the Gemara in Masechet Chulin. Right? So therefore, salting something deep, that makes it proper for eating. Like you have a meat that you can't eat, and then you salt it, deep salted, and it becomes beef jerky. Some strange people eat it, right? And they like it. I'm just joking. Like, if you like it, it's okay. They have actually kosher ones. We're waiting for Bet Yosef to come out, right? But how did it become edible? How in the world? Salt does that. Softens, prepares the food. Says the Rambam, that's an offshoot of the Isur of Bishul on Shabbat. Preparing something, making it edible, is an offshoot of Isur Bishul on Shabbat. That's how Rambam understands this. You have the Rambam, you have Rashi. You'll see how the Shulchan Aruch is chorez shtehem bechariza achat. Shulchan Aruch is going to paskin like Rambam, but he also is going to say the svara of Rashi is going to bring that as well. So it's important, therefore, to know both of this as we develop this sugya. So it says the Mishnah Berurah. There is a machlok because if you paid attention, I'm not sure if you paid attention, I'm going to read again and make the diuk, you'll see there is a hole in the Shulchan Aruch, right? And this hole becomes a question. Shulchan Aruch writes, and I'll translate, you cannot make brine when you're doing large quantities to put inside things that you are going to pickle. That you cannot do. Then Shulchan Aruch says, aval, but you know what you can do? Yachol la'asot mimenu me'at. You could make a little bit, latet letoch hatafshil, to put inside the food, not inside kvashim, not inside pickles, but you putting it inside your food that you're going to be eating, right? To make it more salty. So what is missing over here? I want to put it on things, but not necessarily food. What is it? Does it go up after my kavanah? The Shulchan Aruch says you cannot make a large quantity, if you want to put it inside kvashim, inside pickles, right? How about if I am making a lot, but I don't want to make it into pickles? I want to use it for whatever it's mutar to use it. Is that mutar? Does it follow my kavanah? Shulchan Aruch seems to say it does. But then afterwards it says you could make a little bit, but not for pickles. You're doing it, put it in the tafshil. So this becomes a question within the Achronim. I'll explain it again if it didn't drop, right? Says the Tochein Shabbat. It says in Sifkatan Hey, he writes it depends on your intention. So if your intention is to put it in pickles, asur. But if your intention is to put it in cooked dishes, then it's mutar even if you have large quantity. Even though the Shulchan Aruch says you can make a little bit to put in cooked dishes, says it's not lav davka. Everything follows your kavanah. So you see how the beginning of the language of Shulchan Aruch and the end language, it's kind of like a collision, right? It's a stira. Maran writes, you could make a little bit to put in food, which indicates you can't make a lot to put into food. But then it says you can't make a lot to put into pickle, which is mashma. You could make a lot to put inside the food, right? The mashma'ut of resha v'sefa is a stira. So Tosefet Shabbat says everything follows your mindset. You could make a lot of brine if you're putting it into things that are mutar. We'll just get into We'll get to it in just a moment, right? On the other hand, the Rabbah says, no, he disagrees completely. He says it's a Gezerah Rabbanan. You cannot make this. Now I'm getting back to your question, right? Says the Rabbah is a Gezerah Rabbanan. You can never make a lot of brine on Shabbat, period. Can't. Why? Because it looks like you are preparing yourself for pickles. The very fact of making the brine, the salt water, is a problem, a lane on its own. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you take a look at the Meiri in Siman Kuf, in Daf Kufchet Amud Aleph, you will see the language of the Meiri is very much aligned with Eliyahu Rabbah, because it says Lo hitiru ela mipnei shenikar. It says they only were matir beme'at, with little, because when you make the brine, just a little bit, a little bowl, a little cup, everyone that looks at you knows that you're going to be dipping something inside of it or pour it into food. Therefore, they were matir, says the Meiri. Now, if you would only have the language of the Meiri, how will you understand it? Of course, you would understand that it means that a lot, the mere fact of making a bucket of brine is a problem because it looks like you want it for pickles. And that's the Mishnah Berurah's psak. The halacha would follow the Eliyahu Rabbah. Fine.
If you're making a small amount, why can't it be 2 to 1?
That's a separate issue, because as we will explain, we'll see the Mishnah Berurah will say in the beginning of Seif Gimal that looks like making muryas. That's a separate element of these. So very good question. Very good question. So when you have something of that consistency, that would be a different element of the Isur, because that's like making muryas, which would be for this process, because normally people do not, for eating, they don't make that, right? For eating, you don't make that thick of a solution of salt, right? Fine. So that's another additional element. Now, how about the little that I make? I have the following question, Rabotai. Listen well. I have 3 seudot in Shabbat. Every seudah I dip a little things, right? So I want to make, imagine I need 5 ounces of salt water for every seudah. So I want to make 15 ounces of salt. Can I make that all at once? Or do I have to wait and every seudah I have to make 5 ounces? Can I make from, so you're telling me that I can't make a lot. Good. Chazak u'baruch. Kibalnu mesirat hamodah. Now, can I make for at least a day? Or do I have to do before every seudah? What do you guys think?
What's considered a lot?
Well, it's not a lot. It's for eating. We said the definition is if you want to eat, you can make it. Right? So for that day alone, can you make it or not? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes, no? Oh, that's a good Jewish community. Amazing. Chacham Elazar, what do you think? Hiding in the corner, huh? So Magen Avraham says, Asur, you can't do it. You have to do before every seudah by itself. You can't do it like that, right? So Magen Avraham says. Many disagree with that. Right? The Taz, others say, you don't need to. You could make the whole 15, in our example, ounces, you could make it all one shot. No problem, right? Now, Petach Dvir, right? Rav Pontermoli, who was a Abedin in his in Turkey, tremendous sefer. Baruch Hashem, we were zocheh that they recently reprinted it, and we knew, me and my son knew that it's going to go out of print right away, so we bought one for the shul. If you want to take a look at what the tremendous work of the Petach HaDavir, we have it here in the new edition. But Petach HaDavir writes that he wants to be medayek from the Magen Avraham, that the little you cannot make for the whole day, even if you put some salt in it, some oil in it, it's still going to be asur. You can't make from Seudah of the morning for Seudah Shlishi. You can't do that. Now, this whole oil business, we'll just get into it in a moment, but you can't do it, says the Petach HaDavir. On the other hand, Chacham Ovadia completely disagrees with it. In Chazar Ovadia, in Chelek Dalet, on page Tafnun Bet, he disagrees with the entire thing. He says, no, mutar you can do from Seudah of night, for morning, for afternoon, you can, no problem, right? The Ben Ish Chai and Kaf HaChaim, the Ben Ish Chai in Parashat Bo, in Ot Yutet, the Kaf HaChaim over here by us in Ot Yud Aleph, they both take the side of the Magen Avraham, and the Kaf HaChaim's language is nachon. It says proper to do the salt for every salt water for every Seudah. Fine. So, Chatchila, if you want to be mahmir, hamachmir yesh lo al ma lismoch, right? You have definitely the Ben Ish Chai. I have a friend. His father is one of the main poskim in Mexico City. His brother is the Rav Rashi of Panama, and he would tell me his father has written over 60, 70 Sfarim. Michael Perez Shlita. So he said, my father has a sprach, has a language. He says, "Hamachmir yesh la al ma lismoch." He said, we can't just be mahmir. You have to have basis to be mahmir, right? Our Chacham Ovadia alav hashalom used to say, yesh mekel v'yesh kal. You have someone that's mekel, but he knows the sugya. He knows it well. He could be mekel, right? And then you have a person that's kal. He himself is a lightweight. He doesn't know. Therefore, he's mekel. And then, on the other hand, said Chacham Ovadia, you have mahmir. You have someone that learns the sugya and comes out the chumrah, and you have yesh mahmir v'yesh hamor. And you have someone that is mahmir kacha, everything asur, everything is asur, because he doesn't know, better to be safe, right? So you need to have basis to be mahmir also. Anyhow, says that's a Ben Ish Chai Parashat Bo, Kaf HaChaim, nachol la'achmir, says the Kaf HaChaim, to do for every seudah what do you need, right? So again, if you're making the salt water for Pesach night, and many people do the seder in the morning as well, whatever. So don't do it. Make a little salt water for whatever you need. Don't say I'm going to just make for sure. You can't do from Yom Tov Rishon to Yom Tov Sheni. That's according to everyone, right? So once I'm added, I'm going to make salt water for both nights. You can't do that. But even for morning, says the Kaf HaChaim, nachon lachmir, better to be mahmir in that way. So that's that. Now, if you paid attention, Shcharuch said that you could make a little bit of salt in order to put on food, on tafshil, cooked items, right? Is that coming to say something? Yes. That means you cannot pour salt water on vegetables that's darkam likavesh, things that normally are pickled, right? Cucumbers, best example, right? Onions, those types of things that people usually pickle, right? You can't take even a little salt water and pour salt water on a bunch of pickles. You can't do that. You could do on things that are not normally pickled. We will see this example with eggs in just a moment, right? So therefore, it's asur to pour salt water over items that are regularly pickled, such as cucumbers, radishes, onions, etc. Right? And Kaf HaChaim paskins this as well. In Sif Katan Yud Bet, in Ot Yud Bet, in Ar Siman, Kaf HaChaim says, that's exactly what Maran is coming to teach. You can't do that. Now, nowadays we don't pour salt water and stuff, we just salt them, right? It's not necessarily smart, because you end up consuming much more salt when you actually salt them versus if you would just dip things in. If you're trying to, for whatever health reason, you're trying to cut short on that, dipping in salt water would be a way to go. But nevertheless, that would be asur. Now, hold this in a freezer in your mind for just another 2 or 3 minutes. We'll come back to actually salting things, right? Now, adding oil, does that make a difference? So, well, this is machloket Gidolei Achronim. Olat Shabbat writes, and Mishnah just drops it as a machloket Achronim, and he says what he says, which we'll get to in just a moment. Olat Shabbat says, if you add oil, right, it will be mutar. How do I know? Because Rabbi Yossi, that we spoke about 5 minutes ago, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi says it clearly, that if you add some oil before you put the water, if you add some oil is machlish koach hamelach. It weakens the melach, therefore it's mutar. If you add some oil to the mix, mutar. So it says Olat Shabbat, from his shita you see to Chachamim. But the majority of the Acharonim disagree with this. Starting from the Ma'amar Mordechai. Ma'amar Mordechai says, who told you that? Chachamim, they say making large quantities of salt water is asur. They don't differentiate yes oil, no oil. So for all I'm concerned, it doesn't make a difference if you have oil in the mixture afterwards. It's going to be asur, right? And that's the shita. He says he says from Rabbeinu Yerucham, one of the Gedolei Rishonim. Rabbeinu Yerucham was a Talmid of Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher. He says from Rabbeinu Yerucham you already see like this, right? And many Achronim paskin like this. The Kaf HaChaim paskins like this. The Eliyahu Rabbah, Hagaon Rab Zalman, Shulchan Aruch Harav. Pri Megadim says that that's what Maran Shulchan Aruch holds. So therefore, that's what we stick with. We stick with the fact that putting the oil does not really make that much of a difference. It still would be asur, and that's the shita that the Mishnah Berurah also brings. Now, what's the halacha? Now we're going to move. We have the basis of the sugya. We're going to move through the next 4 seifim very quickly, because this was basically the structure that we needed for the sugya. The rest is halacha lema'aseh, of what actually comes out practically speaking, halacha lema'aseh. So it says, the Gemara. Gemara says that you cannot make, we mentioned already, you cannot make a salt water that's 2/3 salt, right? That's Abaye, the Ran paskins it, and that's the halacha, right? Now, the Kaf HaChaim writes the same thing applies to sugar. You remember we mentioned sugar before? So he brings from Harav Yesode Yosef. It says same thing as with sugar. Chacham Obadiah goes to town with this in his Sefer on Mishnah Berurah called Leviatchen. In Leviatchen, he says completely not true, because sugar does not have the same properties as salt. It may have some preservation nature, but it's not at all like salt. Come on. Therefore, you cannot create your own hidushim like this, and it's mutar. Therefore, if you want to put a lot of sugar in something and keep it, or on Shabbat, put a lot of deep sugar water, right? 2/3 sugar, like saturated with sugar, and you want to dip things in, kol hakavod, no problem, right? People do that still nowadays, right? Yeah, you want to make, let's say you want to have to dip your waffles, whatever it is, you don't have the solution, you want to make your own, come up with a case. Mutar or asur, what Kaf HaChaim says, should be, according to Harav Yesod Yosef, should be asur. Harav says, no, it's mutar, you could do it, it's only with salt water, right? Not with sugar water, not with sweetened water. Fine, so that's one element. Now, Sif Bet, Maran writes, En osin Sif Gimel rather, says Maran Shulchan Aruch, Asur limloach hatichot tznon, arba o chamesh beyachad. This comes from a Gemara. Says Maran, you can't have radish, or for that matter, cucumber is more of a thing nowadays. You can't have 4 or 5 cucumbers and salt them together. Okay, so this is a big thing, because people do this. We do it at home all the time during the week, right? The kids come from school or in the morning, you want to refresh them, right? and you have some cucumbers, and you salt it. They munch on cucumbers. So you want to put some salt on cucumbers. The mutar asur. Well, it says sh'aruch asur. Maran says you can't have 4 or 5 cucumbers, radishes, and put salt on. Limloach chatichot zinon arba b'chamesh biachad mipeneh shenir'eh kekovesh kvatishim. This is an offshoot of pickling, right? So that's how you pickle things. V'akovesh asur mipeneh shehu ki mebashel. You see, it says kovesh is asur because he is like mebashel. Who is that? The Rambam. Remember, we said Rambam holds it's an offshoot of bishul, of cooking, and Rashi holds it looks like tanning, ma'abid. So here is where Shulchan Aruch actually mentions the shita of the Rambam. You each one of the cucumbers, you dip it in salt water, or you put salt on it and you eat it alone, right? How about? Well, don't be scared just yet. How about making salad? Right? So that's very nogel l'maaseh, because well, you may not be putting cucumbers in front of your kids like that, or maybe you could salt each one and give it to them. But I want to salt my Israeli salad, the salad I made. There's cucumbers and can't do that. We'll get to that in just a moment. How about I have a plate, so I don't put all the cucumbers there and salt them, but I want to put salt on one, put it there. Salt another one, put it there. Salt another. Can I do that? Take a guess? I'm not suggesting you should guess halachas, but what do you think? Shulchan Aruch will say that that's mutar. So it's not that horrible. You just don't want to have a bunch of things. Bunch of things, you're just putting salt on a bunch of things. That looks like pickling. You don't pickle one cucumber. Pickle a bunch of things together. So if you're putting salt on it, what's the difference? That becomes like pickling. That, Shulchan Aruch says, black and white, that's asur. But give me just another minute before you shoot at me, right? Says Shulchan, I'm just going to go ahead, right? And read, and then come back to your questions. But says Shulchan Aruch, eggs, you have 50 eggs, you want to put 50 eggs and put salt on all of them and give it to all of your 50 children, Bezrat Hashem, mutar. What's the difference? The difference is, betzim is not derech lekovshan. Have you ever seen a person that makes egg pickles? No, you don't pickle eggs. So therefore, because nobody pickles eggs, when someone sees you putting salt on a bunch of eggs, no one says, oh, you're pickling it. No, it doesn't look like it. Therefore, it's one notch lower. The entire halacha of salting egg is one notch lower because people don't do that. Therefore, it's mutar. You could do a bunch of them together, no problem. But can I do it with cucumbers? Well, cucumbers, I think most cucumbers in the world are pickled, right? I don't know, you could probably Google that, but, right? What? No, I'm not sure about that. So actually, when we did Hilchot Shabbat, I realized over 85% of oranges in the United States are juiced. Right? It says derech lesochtan, right? We saw that together. But here I'm not sure. I haven't done my homework on this, but a lot, that's for sure derech to do pickle. Therefore, when it's derech to do pickle, it would be asur, right? But even that, says the Mishnah Berurah, salads. Can I salt my salad? Says the Mishnah Berurah, yes. The minhag is we do put salt on our salad with all the radishes and all the vegetables. That's derech. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, because right away afterwards, you put vinegar, you put lime juice, you put other things, you mix it with other things, so it's clearly not a pickling process, and therefore it's mutar.
What if you don't put that stuff? Some people just want to put salt on their
So that would become a little bit of a problem. You would put your portion, put a little salt immediately before you use it. That would be mutar, right? But not to a mass. But usually people have salad dressing anyways. Like if people don't have it, you have at least lemon or some other, depending what type of thing you're having. You have other dressing that you're going to be adding. That's mutar. And says the Mishnah Berurah, if you want to be mamash machmir, you put a little oil or a little dressing first, and then you put the salt. That for sure is mutar. No, that's according to everybody. That would be mutar. And now in Sif Dalit, Maran writes, Yesh mish katav shemutar litpol kama chatichot zenon, achat levata ulanicham yachad lefanav. He paskins like the shita that says every cucumber, every radish, you could salt it, put it on your plate. Salt the next one, put it on your plate. Salt the next one, mutar. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says that their minhag would be to be mahmir, to try to stay away from that. But again, according to Maran Shulchan Aruch, that would be mutar. Now, this whole thing comes from the Shita of Rab Nachman in Gemara. It's right there in Daf Kuf Chet. That Rab Nachman says the Gemara would not put two cucumbers, two radishes, and salt them. He would have them one by one, eat them, right? We'll salt one, eat, right? That's the basis of this thing. So what we come out lahalacha lema'aseh is, don't put a bunch of cucumbers, whatever it is else that you have, and salt all of them if it's something that usually is pickled. But you feel free to do it to eggs or anything else that's usually not pickled. And even those items that are pickled usually, you could do them one by one and put them down. That also would be mutar. And by salad, we have the fourth halacha, additional leniency. The Mishnah Berurah writes that if you are immediately going to put some vinegar or lime or whatever else it may be dressing on top, that's also mutar. Because it's clearly not doing kvishai. It's clearly, and if you want to be even more machmir, put the lime, the vinegar, the oil, whatever it is that you're putting on dressing first and then salt it. Then for sure, according to everybody, would be certainly good.
When you have a bunch of pickles, you said that you cannot do it all to put them at the same time. You have to do it individual. But what if you add vinegar and oil to all the pickles afterwards?
So again, putting that becomes the machloket that we discussed, whether or not adding oil helps or not, right? That becomes that machloket, right?
I have a question. In the equation, there's a factor still missing. Timing. We're not considering that. Pickling is not putting salt and eating it right away. Pickling is a process that takes a long period of time.
So we're getting to that. So
Timing is the same thing.
on that says Shulchan Aruch in Seif Hey, right? Asur limloach basar mebushar or betza mebushelet, right? If you want to, so we talked about eggs, right? Or meat. So says the Shulchan Aruch, if you have cooked meat, or betza mebushelet, hard-boiled egg, and you want to salt them, asur limloach basar mebushal or betza mebushelet, it is asur to do that, lehanicha, to leave it. If you want to wait a long time for the next Seudah, you're doing it from Shabbat morning for Shabbat afternoon, asur. So in other words, even this that we are talking about, that's why you have to have a chronology, otherwise everyone's going to become confused, right? The four halachot that we said, which is beautifully set up, right? You can't make a lot of brine by itself. You cannot make even a little bit if it's a thick solution. You can't salt a bunch of cucumbers together, but you could salt them one by one and put them next to each other. You could salt a bunch of egg together even, right? But even those that you can, it's only if it's for immediate use. But if you are doing this, even eggs, which is not the derech, even eggs and basar, if you want to salt them to absorb them, because why would you do it, by the way? Because it absorbs it, it becomes delicious by itself. Right? Try it at home on a non-Shabbat day, right? That's why people would do it. Putting salt right before you eat it is just not the same as having it absorb the salt properly and soak it in, nowadays no one has time for anything. You just throw it in the microwave and that's it, right? But it actually makes a difference in quality. So if you do that, that is like kvisha. That would be asur, right? You can't do it lahanicha. Right? So that's it. And the final seif, we're out of time. Sif Vav says, "En limloach biyachat harbe polim v'adashim shenitbashlu b'kili patan." If you have a lot of green beans in their sharbit, in their what do you call it? There's a name for it. Shell. Yeah. You have that, yeah, pot. You can't put salt on a lot of beans in their pot, in their shell. Even adashim, even the lentils and so on, when they're in the pot, it's asur, because that's also an offshoot of the same thing, the hamelicha mo'ilahem, because the salting does help. It becomes like the cucumber thingy, ibud, and therefore it would be a problem. So that basically completes the journey through everything that's practical for nowadays, both according to the Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. Nowadays, the next seif is going to be crushing. This is amazing, because every week we're going to have a whole new topic. Basically, in the Hilchot Shabbat, we covered all the topic of salting today. Next week we're going to be discussing, crushing things on Shabbat. You want to crush anything, pepper or whatever else that is usually broken to small pieces, right? Cutting small salads using those tools that you have, right, for making salad, or like choppers, right? With different heads that they have, small, big, right? All those things which are really, really relevant halachot of Shabbat, we're going to be discussing Be'ezrat Hashem in the next shiur. Chazaku Baruch.